Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt were our nation's 32nd President and First Lady.
Their home on Springwood Estate became a place of great historical significance as it served as both the birthplace of President Roosevelt, but also the place where he came to think, even during his presidency, which was 1933 to 1945. Hyde Park was established as a historical site in 1945, and the USA's 32nd president is now buried there. President Roosevelt was born and raised at his family's estate in Hyde Park. He called it the center of the world, and in many ways it became that. He entertained the King and Queen of England, feeding them hot dogs at a picnic on the forested property. He also met with Winston Churchill and Stalin at Springwood to lay out World War I plans. But the influential were not limited to Roosevelt. His wife Eleanor, who became the first delegate to the United Nations, also had a home at Springwood. JFK also visited Springwood to seek Eleanor's endorsement.
Enjoy this story from a friend showing how simple and normal the Roosevelt couple was compared to the lavish life they could have lived.
Mrs. Roosevelt had done everything plain. Cooking was plain. She didn't have too many fancy dishes. As a matter of fact, I don't remember any fancy dishes at all. She had a friend of hers come one time, and when she came home one night, she told Marge, she said, "Marge, Mr. Christie is coming tomorrow." And she said, "You know, every place people go, like Mr. Christie, they have fancy dishes for them, or they have filet mignon or steak, different things of that nature." And she said, "You know what I would like you to make for Mr. Christie, Marge, tomorrow?" My wife thought, well, here it goes. She's going to order something great now. So my wife said, "What is it, Mrs. Roosevelt?" And she says, "I would love you to make one of your good beef stews and homemade bread for Mr. Christie." Well, the next day came and gone, and Mr. Christie had his stew and homemade bread. And he came into the kitchen, and he thanked my wife for one of the finest meals he ever had, and handed her a $100 bill.
We expected to find preserves or recreated rooms that Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt actually used at the Springwood Estate. We had also heard about the first presidential library that FDR started and were interested to see it. Many of our expectations were fulfilled because there were many statues and commemorations of the Roosevelts throughout the park. The interest that prompted our choice. Both of us were fascinated by the Great Depression and also the outstanding leadership roles of both FDR and especially Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, to really embrace the role. Since the Roosevelts had the longest term as President and First Lady, we wanted a closer look at the couple who spent the most time in control of the country.
Some of the rooms we saw gave a lot of insight and were very, very fascinating.
One of the things that really stood out to us was FDR's collections.
In the entrance hall,
the walls were covered with paintings, and he also had collections of birds that he had collected as a young boy that were also featured on the walls. So this showed a glimpse into Roosevelt's boyhood and how he passed his time when he was younger. FDR had an extremely impressive library of over 14,000 volumes, 2,000 naval paintings, 300 bird species, 200 ship models, and 1.2 million stamps.
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
FDR's presidency was especially iconic because of the historical context and the events taking place at the time. Being the only president to serve 4 terms, he enacted the New Deal in his first 100 days. The second New Deal contained Social Security, which we still use today. He also created the interstate highway system. While some of his other proposals were considered unconstitutional and not enacted, this is what America needed to take them out of the Great Depression. On top of this, Roosevelt also had to face World War II, the beginning through the end. He died within the first year of his 4th term. However, he still faced a lot during these 3 terms. He was a very strong speaker, and the nation looked up to him a lot. Therefore, he didn't want to be seen as weak. What challenged this was his battle with polio. He relied on a wheelchair most of the time, but was rarely photographed in it. Because of this, he did many of his speeches over what he called fireside chats, where he would talk in the radio as if he were talking to the American people directly like one of his closest friends. Of course, FDR's estate in Hyde Park and his entire presidency relate to many AP themes.
Visiting Hyde Park would be useful and informative to any AP US history student and any person in general. Getting a glimpse into the private life of the presidential couple humanizes parts of history for students.
Instead of seeing historical figures as one-dimensional, pieces of their character come together and make them easier to relate to.
In short, FDR's story is inspiring as he overcame adversity to achieve his means.
Happy days are here again, the